examiners and judges ready? Okay, start. 3, 2, 1 now. Hi, my name is Ray, and I'm the first speaker from ProCase. And we agree on the resolution that is as following. The continuation of anti-drug policies in Latin America does more harm than good. First condition, imprisoning those easily replaceable non-violent traffickers not only leads to prison overcrowding, but also teach them how to be better criminals. First point, BBC reported in 2010, imprisoning minor offenders is useless as they're easily replaced by bosses at the top. A warrant, but for most of those locked up, prison can destroy their lives. Second, only ABC News Latin America specialist in 2012, he says incarcerating drug users is always counterproductive as you learn a lot more about drugs and other crimes in jail than outside. More than this, by keeping users out of criminal system, instead exposing them to health and social services, you increase the chance of rehabilitation. Third, in fact, drug-related violence and murder rate already have been increasing. Our opponents might say there has been some progress of their policies in a few Latin American countries. However, with this insignificant progress, their policies caused the rise of violence and murder rates in Latin America. Silk in 2012, a number of other studies, including United Nations reports, suggest that drug trafficking continues to be a major contributing factor behind rising homicide rates in the region. In recent years, drug trafficking-related violence has surged most dramatically in Mexico, and heavily armed drug traffickers have battled each other and the Mexican government for control of drug smuggling routes in the United States. Fifth, The Economist in 2012, drugs are not the only business of organized crime, but they account for the bulk of gangs' income and thus their firepower. When there was a strategic spot on the trafficking route as the world's highest murder rate, about 80 times that of Western Europe. In a 2009 report, 3 respective former presidents declared the drug war a failure and demanded alternative approaches. Mr. Cardoso has called for the legalization of some drugs. Contention 2, because criminalization of drugs is detrimental both financially and socially, it is necessary for the United States to adopt the legalization of drugs as Portugal, Great Britain, Netherlands, Spain did. By having drugs under control of government, we can see drastic increases in government revenue and alleviation tax burden. In a study for the Cato Institute in 2010, Jeffrey, who's the senior lecturer on economics at Harvard University and senior fellow at Cato, and Catherine Waldock, professor of economics at New York University, estimate that legalizing drugs would save the government approximately $1.3 billion annually in expenditures related to the enforcement of prohibition. Contention 3. Production of illicit drugs has shown to be shifting to countries without ever showing signs of complete eradication. No matter how much money, effort, and time the United States wastes on the current international drug dilemma, it is virtually impossible to eliminate all drug production as demand for the drugs will fuel and give incentives for drug production. According to Chepsuk in 1999, during the next 10 years, drug trafficking syndicates simply shifted their resources from Turkey to Southeast Asia to Mexico, and then to Southeast Asia again, remaining one step ahead of United States diplomats and drug agents. This is Carlos Humberto Ortiz, the professor of economics in 2009. The balloon effect is responsible for the paradoxical result that drug repression has no effect on final consumer prices. Therefore, we urge you to vote for pro side. Thank you.
Are the judges ready? Are the judges ready? Yeah. Hello, I am Nicole, and I'm the first speaker from CON. We negate the resolution that states continuation of current U.S. drug policy in Latin America does more harm than good. Contention 1 is Latin America drug war is expanding. Drug war in Latin America is expanding, and U.S. is spending on anti-drug efforts in Latin America is much higher than a decade ago, Mendoza says in February 3rd in 2013. Over the decade, defense contracts jumped from the $119 million to $629 million, supporting everything caliber helmets for the Mexican Army to airport runways in Aruba, according to the federal contract data. Last year, $803 million, $30 million, almost $9 out of every $10 of U.S. law enforcement and military aid spent in the region went toward countering narcotics, up to 30% in the past decade. This piece of evidence is important because drug war in Latin America is expanding, and spending on anti-drug efforts in Latin America is much higher than a decade ago. The contention two is drug production is shifting from Latin America to Asia. It proves ending the war on drugs in Latin America would pivot resources and attention to Asia. As Alfred J. McCoy and Ellen A. Buck noted, during the next 10 years, drug trafficking syndicates simply shifted their resources from Turkey to Southeast Asia to Mexico and then to Southeast Asia again, remaining one step ahead of U.S. diplomats and drug agents. This evidence is important because ending the war on drugs in Latin America would pivot resources and attention to Asia. Our contention three is the war on drugs is an even bigger threat to Asian democracy than Latin America. According to Basquiat CATO Institute in 2001, illegal opium production takes place in Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Burma, and other countries in South and Central Asia. Many of these nations are struggling to become more market-oriented and establish the foundations of civil society. U.S. supply reduction efforts are increasingly focusing on countries that produce those drugs. Yet, if aggressive persecution of the drug war has managed to undermine relatively well-rooted democracies such as Colombia's, there is reason to believe that U.S. drug policy in Asia may be even more reckless. This evidence is important because war on drugs is even bigger threat to Asian democracy than Latin America. Our last contention is war on drugs in Asia is increasing poverty and food insecurity. As Father in Thailand, the Thailand-based journalist said, crackdown on opium cultivation isn't the solving problem, promises, it's only hitting the poor poppy farmers, and it's high time to re-evaluate these policies. Even United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes Communication Chief in Bangkok, John Valho, admits that some drug control measures have driven opium-growing communities toward chronic poverty and increasing food insecurity. One couple from northeastern Thailand has shot dead after coming unexplained wealth and being added to blacklist. They were, in fact, lottery winners. This evidence is important because war on drugs in Asia increases poverty and food insecurity, and it will show worse situation than Latin America's drug war. For these reasons, Judge, we urge you to vote for Con. Thank you for listening.
That's right. So let's get started. Is complete eradication possible?
It's not.
Okay.
When should this policy be implemented?
Hmm?
When should this policy be implemented?
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible? Then what do we do to the prisoners? Do you know how much money and resources are needed for legalizing?
What do you say?
What do we do to all the prisoners? Do you know how much money, resources, and time are needed for legalizing?
It actually saves 41.3 billion, as we stated in second contention. Did that answer your question? Okay. So how would you define a successful anti-drug policy?
Successful anti-drug policy is when the drug-free world.
Okay, so that means...
Can I ask my question?
Okay.
Well, you're only saying what you can do, but there's zero realism to that. If you're having a bunch of car accidents because many people are over speeding up and then how it is low.
I didn't hear the first part, can you repeat?
Okay. You're only saying what you can do, but there is zero realism to that. Because the evidence you have provided, such as Portugal, UK, but that is Europe, and you're dealing with demand. But Latin America, you're saying that you should deal with the supply. So I don't see that as a perfect evidence.
I'm surprised that you asked that question since you have no case evidence that proof legalization wouldn't work. And that my next question is, so you think, is it okay to sacrifice Latin American instead of Asian people?
Can you rephrase your question?
So do you think it's okay to sacrifice Latin American instead of Asian people?
What's your point?
Answer my question.
Can you restate your question?
Is it okay to sacrifice Latin American instead of Asian people, as you stated in Asian people's argument?
Well, I'm not saying that which Latin America and Asian people which worth less or better.
Okay, ask a question.
What do we do to the people that legalization won't really help? According to Drug Science and Education Center, it said overused drug users cannot be medically treated.
So you think it's okay to violate their human rights because they cannot be treated with medical treatment? Okay, that was it.
Can I have 15 seconds? Our contentions are as follows. First, criminalization of drugs serves no purpose whatsoever in deterring the demand issue, which is 20 times more efficient than cutting supplies, as the present U.S. government is doing. Second, legalization of drugs imposes a greater positive outcome than the plan our opponent proposed in Latin America. Third, as our opponent agreed firmly, complete eradication is impossible due to the circulation of the balloon effect. This tells us that they admit that it is virtually impossible to eradicate drug production and transportation. Not only that, but they stated that the standard for a successful drug policy is if the world is eradicated of drugs. But it's not, which just reinforces our contention that the drug war is ineffective. Their contentions were as follows. First, drug war in Latin America is expanding, and that the current United States federal government is increasing expenditure spent in the Latin American drug war. However, our most recent source evidence by Michael Weisenstein, 2013, March 8th, suggests that the deep federal budget cuts are forcing the U.S. to send fewer surveillance planes and naval ships to halt Latin American drug shipments, meaning the anti-drug effort will depend more on local governments hobbled by lack of equipment and official corruption. Their second contention was that the U.S. drug policy will shift from Latin America to Southeast Asia. However, their outdated source evidence in 1999 only deals the shift of drug production and not the shift of U.S. drug policy to Asia. Their third contention was that there will be a bigger threat. It will lead to a bigger threat to the Asian democracy. However, legalization, as stated in our second contention, resolves their proposed impact. Not only that, but their case evidence said that the U.S. drug war undermined Colombia's well-rooted democracy. Doesn't that confirm that the current U.S. drug policy is destroying the firmly established democracy in Colombia before it will do to Asia? In conclusion, all of their contention regarding the Asian pivot theory are invalid because the legalization of drugs will remove the reason as to why the U.S. will need to waste further government budget on the current pointless drug war. By holding drugs under government control, legalizing removes the expenditure wasted on the current status quo in Latin America, and it removes the incentives from drug cartels to cultivate drugs. Legalization serves as a benefactor to remove further U.S. sovereign territorial interference and a bank which saves $41.3 billion US dollars, not including tax imposition. Their case evidence for the drug war pivot to Asia has absolutely no legal feasibility whatsoever because the evidence deals as to how drug production will shift, not the alteration of the US government involvement to Asia. Not only that, but we are resolving the demand issue, which has been confirmed 20 times more efficient than cutting the supply side of the drug war. This proves that their contention about how operations will be effective is totally invalid. This is Colonel Abbott, Joint Chief of Staff, 2011. But we have learned from Plan Colombia that supply side interdiction, enforcement, and prosecution does not stop illegal cross-border drug trafficking. You're just nibbling at the symptoms and never addressing the root causes. Studies have shown that the treatment and rehabilitation are 20 times more effective, in which it is what we are proposing, in decreasing the illegal drug trade. They also stated that the criminalization of drugs is necessary to stop people from using drugs, and that legalization will increase drug use. However, we have solid contemporary evidence to counter this argument. According to Ernest Drucker, Huffington Post, 2012, from 1970s, Netherlands, Spain, and the Netherlands have a lower drug use than in the United States. The mere fact that countries which legalize drugs have a lower drug use penetration than in a country which criminalizes drug users epitomizes the inefficiency of the current drug policy of the US. Thus, we have proved that first, legalization of drugs works as a result of the demand side of the drug dilemma, which is 20 times more effective. And second, we have proved that the anti-drug policy will never achieve its goal of eradication. And third, the anti-drug war, which only cuts the supply side of the drug production, does not work at all. Thus, we urge your approval.
Hi, my name is Coco, and I'm the second speaker for the con. Our opponent said criminalization makes the criminals better criminals, but then due to my evidence over here written by Hans, it says, with respect to the creation and maintenance of drug laws, however, the function of morality in labeling individuals as deviant because of use of illicit drug provides a ready-made rationale for the relative harshness of drug laws as they stand. And for the murder rates, they said that especially in Mexico, the murder rates went up, but then right now the murder rates are going down due to our evidences, so I don't think that would be a problem right now. And as for legalization, do they mean that we should legalize all the drugs? Then wouldn't the drug users be happy and use more drugs? And also for the shift, when they said that they would shift and it's no use, then do they mean we should just give up and let them run? Then I think that everybody would just shift so that if we just give up so easily. And when my opponent said that supply was failing, but my question is demand a success? Is it better? And is there a place that demand is better? Can you provide some evidence? Because I think the evidence is a little bit low. And they also said that the attention was the shift to Asia. The attention was only to Asia, but not the government. But then if the drug war in Latin America finishes, of course the government would work on to Asia. So the whole thing would be in Asia now, which would be worse because Asia doesn't have enough money to provide solutions to fix the drug war. Thank you.
Oh, it's my fault. Sorry. So is it my turn? Okay. So you talked about moral stance, but what is the use of moral stance when our alternative solution is 20 times more effective?
Even though we have problems with criminalization and overcrowding, we have to respect the creation and maintenance of the drug laws. So we need to put them in prison. So yeah, I guess can I ask my question?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you agree that the drug war is shifting to Asia on your contentions?
No.
We and experts see that if we stop the drug war in Latin America, the resources, money, and attention would shift to Asia, where it's gonna be worse, not just worse, terrible. Don't you agree?
No.
You may ask.
Okay. You talked about. Do you have any evidence that legalization would not work? It's a yes or no question.
Uh, What do you mean by legalizing? Is it like the whole drug, or is it like just?
Legalization under government control, just like cocaine and alcohol. I mean, tobacco and alcohol, sorry.
Wait, can you state your question again? Sorry.
Do you have any factual evidence that supports that legalization does not work? It's just a yes or no question.
No. But then if we
Okay.
use,
You can ask question.
You can ask your question.
you don't agree, do you have any evidence that the war is not shifting to Asia?
We have evidence that legalization will prevent it from shifting to Asia.
Can you tell us who that's written and when it's written?
It's common sense because legalization removes the purpose as to why the United States have to move to Asia to cause another drug war if the drugs are legalized.
But are you aware that the shifting to Asia is already happening?
Yeah, that's why.
Yes, that's why we are promoting legalization because as you have already stated, shift to Asia is worse, right? We don't want that to happen, so we are legalizing drugs.
No. Okay. So in first crossfire, the first con speaker admitted that the complete eradication is impossible. So they're fighting for impossible goal, which contradicts their own point. And in second crossfire, we asked the question, what is the use of moral stance when our alternative solution, which is legalization, is 20 times more efficient? So, and they did not answer our question properly and thoroughly. And we have the smarter alternative solution that will call the end of this drug war seems terrible and endless. And legalization and having control under government instead of mafias and gangs. Judge, which do you think is safer and reliable? I think the answer is government. They said legalization wouldn't work without any warrant, which means it's not a valid argument. While we brought up so many case evidences that prove legalization would work. While their plan is raising criminals in jails and violates human rights of minor offenders, as we stated in first contention, our plan helps people to get back on the right track, saves money, and finally call the end of the drug war at the same time. Furthermore, legalization of drugs alone completely resolves Asian pivot that the opponents brought up in their entire contention, because there will be no need to eradicate or interdict drugs anymore, and there will be no need for drug dealers to shift, which prevents anti-drug policy to succeed. Therefore, the high solvency of the impacts of their entire contention has been proven by our legalization in our second contention. Plus, they did not talk about likelihood or probability of Asian pivot. Regarding that, we need to adopt legalization because legalization is the very solution that would lower the probability they have not even mentioned. Legalization is demand-side solution, which simply makes it unnecessary for smuggling and selling drugs for traffickers and mafias. Moreover, they have no solid case evidence for legalization. It would cost money, while we have our solid reliable evidence says it would consistently save huge amount of money, as repeatedly said. Thank you.
I get 15 seconds of prep time?
Last 50, do you need more?
James and Ray's best argument was demand-side focused policy will be a lot more effective. However, the pro side had not provided any evidence that where, when, how the demand-sided policy had succeeded, and also they didn't answer our question that how the example they have given for the legalization is same to the Latin America. Imagine a world. You walk on the street, every single person you see is sick of drugs. You don't want your mom, your dad, your baby, your child, your family, not only your family, but people to live in a drug-sick world. Pro is saying that they should stand there doing nothing because they have. We urge you to vote for con because the word we offer is word without the drugs. Probability show that it's happening. Legalization? They don't get it. Do you know how much resource and money are needed for that? Also, the world is sick enough with alcohol and cigarettes. Cigarettes, you tell your parents to stop it, you tell your child to stop it, but if worse, the word that Pro is saying, cocaine, heroin is the meth. People don't stop making cigarettes because it costs lower than the past. People don't stop buying cigarettes because they have less cigarettes than the before. They don't. So we urge you to vote for con.
Right, crosswalk. So, do you agree that legalization of drugs will solve your Asian pivot argument?
I'm not sure about that because I said you have not provide that the example that we would satisfy.
Okay, interesting. We have provided so many case evidences. Last question. Last question.
On your contention, didn't you agree that the drug war is shifting to Southeastern Asia?
Again, can you repeat your question again?
On your contentions, didn't you agree that the problem is shifting to Southeastern Asia?
Oh, I think that was already asked in the second crossfire, and we already answered that legalization is the very solution that would make it not happen.
Our question is that, as case evidence shows, Spain and Portugal, which has legalized drugs, have a lower drug user percentage rate than in Latin America, which criminalize drug users. What do you think about that?
Sorry.
So, Portugal legalized drugs, and they have a lower drug user rate than in America, which illegalized drugs. Why do you think so?
Portugal is not part of Latin America, and even though it happened in one country, doesn't mean that it's gonna be effective in Latin America too.
Interesting. We're not only talking about Portugal, but also Spain and the Netherlands. Okay, it's
May we
your
ask
time
a
to.
question?
Yeah.
Do you have evidence that Asia's democracy is not weaker than Latin America? Do you have evidence violence will not be the problem?
Can you repeat your question?
Do you have evidence that Asia's democracy is not weaker than Latin America? Do you have evidence violence will not be the problem? And can you guarantee that you will be reasonable for the poverty and the food and insecurity?
It might be possible, and you didn't propose your probability or likelihood of your impact. So, as you said, legalization will solve the problem earlier than it would likely to happen.
It's your turn to question. It's our turn.
Yeah.
So you think it's
Right, you have to start running out of time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go.
Their best three arguments were obviously of the Asian pivot theory. Conveniently, we can categorize all of their arguments in one because our contention of legalization of drugs solves the entire drug dilemma because it removes the reason as to why the US needs to involve in another pointless drug war. Not only that, but they did not talk about the probability of this impact they are proposing. Thus, their entire contentions are incomplete. However, surprisingly, they even dropped our most important contention, which was that the balloon effect will prove that complete eradication is impossible, in which they even conceded to our argument in the crossfire. Because they also failed to argue that our rebuttal as to how the legalization of drugs will not only resolve the drug violence in Latin America, but also save 41.3 billion annually, their original contentions fall as well. They naively think that legalization will expose more drugs, and they have been insistingly stated that in their speech, but that is totally counterintuitive. They give zero factual evidence that legalization will not work. We believe in the legalization of drugs because there's actually contemporary solid evidence which supports its success. From 1960, showing a 40-year trend, Spain and the Netherlands and Portugal have a lower drug user percentage rate than in America, and thus the mere fact that countries which legalize drugs have a lower drug use percentage than in a country which criminalizes drug users epitomizes the inefficiency of the current drug policy of the US. Judges, the world we are providing is a world without violence and a world with a greater chance of rehabilitation to drug addicts. Thus, we urge you pro vote.
Alright. Peach.
We win this debate because of the following reasons. Our opponent didn't include the impact for some contentions, which means their contentions are incomplete. Also, they provided few evidences like when, where, when, who, and relied on common sense. If this solution is so important, why would any experts write about it? They also didn't answer our question of legalization. Also, the amount of money and resources we need for legalization is huge. They weren't even prepared of their questions in Grand Crossfire and ended up wasting some time. Judges, do you want a drug-free world? If so, please vote for the con.